Lesson 5 is all about using what we figure out to calculate and work out portions in regards to ourselves. So we're going to actually be taking some of the skills from last lesson and applying them in this lesson and practicing them a bit. So first of all, you're going to be calculating a range of percentage values. So you're going to be making percent statements about what you need to find and using that to make a little equation and work out how much it's worth. You're going to be able to take that information and put it into a graph so you can compare things. And lastly, you're going to use calculations to work out an actual portion size. So this is basically practice if you were wanting to actually work out your own diet and how much you need to eat based on your own metabolism. So the skill we're taking from last lesson is, and transferred to this one, is that you have to be able to make statements about what you need to find out so that you can then use that to work out a range of percentages. So first of all, we're just going to quickly also learn a bit more vocabulary here. It asks you to work out a range. A range is something that goes from the smallest of something to the largest of something. So it's not a specific amount. So boys might range in size from 150 centimeters tall to about 190 centimeters tall. We don't have a specific amount. We have a minimum and a maximum range in which most people fall. So for question 1 to 6, you're going to be working out the minimum and the maximum number of kilojoules for each food group. So I'm just going to do an example here and then you're going to do the rest. Carbohydrates, basically it's saying that your diet, whatever your metabolism is, however many kilojoules you burn per day, 45 to 50% of your food should be carbohydrates. So you need to figure out what your minimum number of carbohydrates is and your maximum number of carbohydrates is, so that you know that you're in a good range when it comes to what you eat. So the statement that we need to say here is that I need to work out what, now for my minimum, I need to work out what 45% of the personal number of kilojoules burned per day is. So for this person, if they burn 9,000 kilojoules per day, 45% of that at a minimum needs to be carbohydrates, and 50% of it at a maximum should be carbohydrates. Now in your head you'll know that 50% of 9,000 is going to be half of that, which is going to be about 4,500. But we also need to figure out what 45% is as well. So here's our statement. I need to know for the minimum what is 45% of 9,000. Let's change this into an equation. What is can change to equals 45%. Write it down in a way that you can put into a calculator. 45 divided by 100 of turns to times, and the number of kilojoules for this particular person is 9,000. So you need to just put that down and work it out so you can see how much that actually is. Then on the other side of that, that's your minimum amount. You have to work out what the maximum amount of carbohydrates is. And again, you just do the equation, but this time we've got the maximum value in it, 50% or 50 over 100 times by 9,000 kilojoules per day. So the one other thing you must do when you're working this out is you must make sure that you show you're working so that you prove that you know how to do this. And you can also go back and see if there was any hiccups. You can actually find where you went wrong and learn from it so that you don't do it again. So when I see this in your books, I want to see 45 out of 100 times by 9,000, so I know you can take that statement and put it into a calculation that you could put into a calculator. Then you put your answer here, which in this case is 4,050 kilojoules. And in this case is 4,500 kilojoules. And then when we answer it, the question was, what is the range of kilojoules that they can eat from carbohydrates in this case? Well, for carbohydrates, and you have to put this into a table, I can eat, at the minimum, I have to eat 4,050 kilojoules of carbs per day to 4,500 kilojoules of carbs per day. That's my range. And that's what you're going to be doing in various ways with questions 1 to 6. Now question 7 is all about graphing. You need to take that information and graph it. Now when you have a graph, you need to think, what do they actually want you to show? If you read it, it says that we need to show the number of kilojoules for each one of my sources. So my sources are carbs, fats, proteins, and pure sugar. So it wants you to show these split up on a graph and how many kilojoules they each have. So here's your two different parts of your graph. The number of kilojoules for each one of these. These are your groups. So if you have groups, you normally put them on the bottom of a graph. So you'd have your carbs, your fats, your proteins, and your sugar. And of course, if you want to know how big they are and compare them, you're going to have your kilojoules on this side of the graph. So you need to take what you've worked out, the range, and graph them for me. And if you've got a minimum and a maximum, you can actually, as a first one, I think it says to only graph a minimum or a maximum. Yes, it wants you to graph the maximum. Or, for some extra challenge, you can actually graph both the minimum and the maximum so that you get a picture like this that allows you to compare the two. Like that. Last question is a multi-layered question. What steps do you need to follow in order to get to the answer? So the question is, if a piece of steak that is 100 grams contains 180 calories, calculate the largest weight of steak that a person on a 9,000 kilojoule diet could have to be within that recommended range. So you need to think of a few things here. You have to think, how much steak, which is protein, can they have? They can't have 9,000 kilojoules of protein. How much protein can they actually have? Then you've also got to think about how much steak does that convert into. So if you know the number of kilojoules of protein, and you know that every 100 grams of steak is 180 calories, then you can actually go back and back step until you find it. So there's a few steps here. How much protein, how much steak does that can be had? Now, when you're doing that, you have to be considering on converting stuff, because they're giving you things in calories, whereas you need it in kilojoules. And you need to do some division or multiplication in there to change kilojoules back into how many lots of 100 grams do I need, or that can you eat. Now, I don't want to go into too much more detail there, because I would really like you guys to try and figure out the actual steps yourself. If this is not enough with the clues, put your hand up and I'll come over and we'll actually work through it together. I want you guys to try and figure out what each one of these clues means, and do your best to try and figure out that question if you can.